Hi, my name's Matt. I've gotten a lot of questions on my workflow from getting my models from Maya into Substance Painter using things like UDIMS and ID maps and everything like that. So I figured I'd do kind of an all-encompassing video to kind of help guide you through the process that I follow when I'm actually getting my models prepped and ready to go for Substance Painter, as well as my process for setting up my UDIMs and figuring out how I want to set everything up. For this video, I'm going to use BD1 as an example, just because this is my most recently completed project and it's all set up and kind of ready to go. So first thing I like to follow is an organization scheme. I like to make sure my model is organized into groups that represent what I'm probably going to split things into. So they're going to be kind of my larger overhead like groupings. So you can see I've grouped both right, left leg, torso, and head together. These will then get kind of split down when I start setting up my ID maps, but I'll show you how that works. So what we'll do first is we're going to go into our UV editing mode, and here we have our UD. So BD1 was set up to be a model that was using UDIMs. UDIMs are a way to use more UV space in your project instead of just keeping yourself to one small square. A lot of the times you can get away with the one single square just because you may be working on a more simple model or you just don't need that much detail in it. So a lot of times when you lay out your UVs, you're going to be laying it out in this 1001 space, which is this first UV tile. BD1, I wanted to make sure I was pulling as much detail out of it as possible. So when I select things like the head, you can see here, let's see, we'll go to our group mode. You can see here that I've got the head split across two different tiles. And the reason for that being is it gives me more texel density to work with. Each one of these tiles is set up as a 4K layout. These objects themselves get laid out in a 40 by 96 by 40 by 96 layout. It's a lot easier with projects like BD1 because of the multiple pieces to actually split them across multiple UV tiles. You don't really get this option when you're working with things like a character that has a solid piece for their face. You are kind of limited to your single tile, depending on how you set your model up. So UDIMs are really not that complicated. All you're really doing is setting up your UVs and laying them out in one and then moving them over to another tile. Some of the big things to look out for is to make sure your tiles are not overlapping. So you can see right here, this one's pretty close. It's not overlapping technically, but I like to make sure there's usually a pretty good gap between all of these just to make sure that Substance doesn't throw any errors. But you can see once I select the entire model, I used a total of 8 tiles. Technically, you can go straight across. I just kind of like stacking them in a closer setup like this, and it just works for me. But if you want to go straight across the bottom until you can't anymore, that's totally fine too. But you can see the way BD1 was split up. That's how we handle our UDIM setup. That's one of the more important parts that we're going to cover here. The next thing we need to cover is the setup of our ID maps. So once you have your UDIM set up, you're going to have to set up what are called ID maps. ID maps are required for Substance to be able to set up your groupings and transfer them over into Substance Painter. So if you have certain pieces that you want to be able to edit or turn off or turn on, whatever the case may be, or you need to set up an ID map. Generally, I say to keep these under 10, just because you're going to create a really dense scene that you have to go through different items to turn them on and turn them off, and it just makes working a Substance a little bit more complicated. So for BD1, you can see I set up about 6 ID maps. An ID map is just a Lambert or a Blinn or whatever material you want to use, just whatever base material. Name it something that is going to be memorable that you're going to transfer from the application to Substance Painter. And then the reason for the coloring is just to make it a little bit more identifiable. This coloring will not transfer over into Substance, but you'll see how this works in a second here. So each one of these maps was set up in order to allow me to turn off certain pieces and really kind of dial down and focus on painting in certain areas. And really this just comes down to how you want to process your model and how you want to work with it inside of Substance Painter. But with this all set up, all we need to do now is export it. So we will select everything. We're going to go to File, Export Selection. I'm just going to put this on my desktop for demonstration purposes, but we're going to call this BD-1 underscore FBX underscore demo. You really don't need to worry about changing any of the settings here. It's going to export everything and keep everything intact, and we're really not going to have any problems with it. So we'll hit export selection, and then we're going to go ahead and open up Substance Painter. All right, now that we're in Substance Painter, we need to go ahead and set up our project. So we're going to go to new. We're going to leave all of this pretty much default, the PBR metallic roughness, and we're going to select our file off of our desktop. So from here, we're going to change our document resolution. Like I said, I laid those out in a 4K square, and because my machine can handle it, I'm going to go ahead and hit 4K. You can do 2K and you can up resolution it later. You really don't have to worry about this. It's pretty easy to just up res your file before you export everything. Now, the important part that you need to make sure is checked is the use UV tile workflow. This is what tells Substance Painter that you're using multiple UV tiles and it's going to be working in a UDIM setup. With all that set up, you just hit OK. It's going to import. I got some errors there. That's probably just because of something I did wrong with my model. Not a big deal. But you can see how we've imported our model. Everything looks good. Then up here, your ID maps, which are the ones that we set up, cables, glass, these kind of allow you to actually adjust and turn these components off as you're working on them, as well as showing you which UV tiles those parts exist on. From here, just like normal in Substance Painter, you'll go to your bake menu, and we're going to go ahead and just bake everything. We're going to turn off normal. We're going to turn off our thickness, and then I generally just leave the other ones on. You want to change this back to a 4K or 2K, depending on whatever it is resolution that you're baking to. Again, you can change this later. It's not a big deal. And then go ahead and bake. After you're done baking, you shouldn't see any issues, but that's basically how you're going to take your model from Maya, set up your UDIMs, set up your ID channels, and then move it over into Substance Painter to start painting. Again, some of the things to look out for is to make sure that your UV islands aren't crossing over UV tiles. You will get errors and your model will fail to load if you have any pieces that are crossing over boundaries. And then to make sure that single objects themselves exist in one UV tile. Or you cannot take a single piece object and split it across multiple tiles. I hope you found this video helpful. If you enjoyed it or you learned something, please give me a like, give me a follow. Join the community because we have a wonderful Discord. We have a wonderful following on social media and we're only growing. So thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.